All right, welcome to our Thursday night Q&A with William DeMille. We do this every Thursday night. We are on week probably 86. We'll see it on our slide here in a minute when I open that up. But welcome, and we do these Thursday night classes to help people grow fantastic food. We're very interested in the most healthy food in the world and how to grow that. A lot of times we see malnutrition, we see sickness, we see problems and issues with health and nutrition. And so we are doing all we can to help people create the most nutritious food by creating the best soils. So if you can grow food in the most wonderful soil in the world, then your food will be more healthy than if it is grown in less than ideal soil. So that is what I do. I'm a soil scientist. I'm buried in a microscope a lot of days, looking at soil samples, and we teach people lots of farming and gardening and homesteading skills. So that's a little bit about me. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And we are going to get going here. And yeah, so we are on week 86. So I was totally right. So that's fun. So week 86, tonight's discussion will be on the winter room. For the next 13 weeks, we're discussing a set of books. And these are some of my favorites. They're not the best books in the world, but they're certainly fantastic Georgic classics. So I am super excited about sharing these with you to be able to understand and give context to how to grow the best food in the world. Some of these books seem like they're not very much about food production, but they're very much about human production. We have to produce ourselves. We need to discover ourselves, and we need to understand what our own gifts and talents are to be able to make the world a better place. And so a lot of these are about kind of in the self-help genre a little bit, but they're good enough to certainly mention and to be talking about. These are the 9 ways that I help people to grow the best food in the world. I've got a YouTube channel. We do our weekly Q&A, which is what we're doing tonight. We have a Patreon channel, and that's a subscription you can get on to see me working in my garden, and then I answer all your questions. I'm a laboratory to do soil tests, and we look for the living active microbes in the soil that make the soil function. And in functioning soils, you get nutritious food. In non-functioning soils, you get grocery store food. I don't mean to be derogatory, I'm just telling you the way it is. And then I've got the Georgic Schoolroom. That's a 17-week class that I teach in the summers, and we are taking enrollment right now. So if you want to come to that class, you are certainly welcome to fill out an application. I am available for consulting if you want me to do a personal consulting to help you set up your own food or farm producing things. So I work with anybody from pots of vegetables on your balcony all the way up to thousands and thousands of acres. So it doesn't matter. If you're growing in the soil, I can help you. And then my book was recently published called Worry-Free Eating. That is available on Amazon. And my newsletter comes out when we feel like sending one out. So if you want more information, you can go to our website, www.georgicrevolution.com. So spring boot camp is coming up. So our dates are April 25, 26, 27. Those are fantastic dates, and there's more happening on that weekend than you may know. But the thing that you need to be aware of is the reality of boot camp. So you can come to boot camp. That was an inside joke. Sorry, it wasn't very professional, but I've got people laughing, so it worked. So it's here in Wells, Nevada on the Sorensen Ranch. That's where it will be, and we will be learning the basics of food production. The picture on the slide here is me with one of the first boot camps I did, and people come to my greenhouse. This is a picture of my greenhouse, and this is where you learn to understand soil health and all the other things that you need to have nutrient-dense food. Again, the information for this class is on my website, Georgic Revolution. My summer class, which is 17 weeks long, there's 2 pictures here. The bottom picture is 2 years ago I started this class, and I had 2 students. Last year I had 4 students, so these are my graduates. And what we learn, everything that I teach in all the classes, it doesn't matter what class you come to, we're always talking about soil health, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, biodynamics, holistic management, silvopasture, Georgics, ecological agriculture, ecological literacy, and how to be profitable in farming pursuits. So I'm the only person in the world that I have found, and I do a lot of YouTube, I listen to the top scientists in the world, but I'm the only person who brings all of these into one classroom under an umbrella of one thing. Because you can go to the permaculture conferences, they're fantastic. You can go to the biodynamic conferences, those are fantastic. You can go get trained as a holistic management person in Zimbabwe or California or wherever they're doing one of their things. They're fantastic. But I brought the best information to create the best soils into one classroom. So instead of going to 50 places, I just made it more simple for people. So these are the subjects of what we talk about. I just want to go through this really quick. The 5 pillars of the Georgic schoolroom are self-discovery, personal development, homesteading skills, ecological literacy, solving a societal problem. So these are the things that you do when you come to my summer class. A lot of people say, oh, I would love to go to that class, but I'm not really interested in gardening. Do you know of a class where I can become a great human? Yeah, come to my class. That's what it's all about. Gardening is the vehicle to get you to where you need to be in your life, because the garden will uncover your skills, it will uncover your fears, it will uncover your the things that are holding you back, your roadblocks, it will uncover your genius. And so this is what we do in this class. You know, and I didn't even know this until recently, and I sat down with a bunch of my former students and we hashed this out. So it's pretty cool. It's good stuff. But what in the world does Georgic mean? Georgics comes from 2 different ancient languages. And so geo means earth and ergon means work. And so when we work the earth, or farming is what the word Georgic means. And we get the word from the Roman poet Virgil 2,000 years ago. So people always ask that, so I just added that in here so you don't need to ask. So let's get on to our discussion for tonight. So this is going to be pretty fun. The Winter Room by Gary Paulsen. If you read this book, fantastic. If you didn't read this book, fantastic. I'm glad that you are here. The Winter Room is certainly a Georgic classic. It's one of these books that tells us about the history. It teaches us about the way that where we came from, the things in our past from whence we came. That's important to know because we don't understand ourselves. Some of the great psychologists of our modern time tell us that we as an individual human, we are so complex that if we try to understand ourselves, it becomes really hard to do. We can understand ourselves to a point, but there are things that come up in our life and we don't understand those issues, and those can become a problem for us. So it's interesting and valuable to understand where we came from. So the Winter Room takes us back a couple of hundred years to the settling of America, and it tells the story from the perspective of an 11-year-old boy. So there are things in polite society that we don't talk about. We don't talk about a lot of things, and so when you take your kids into public and they start talking to strangers about random things that seem like it's unpolite, then we have teaching moments for our children, right? And anybody who's raised children, we understand that. So the Winter Room, it's not polite. The 11-year-old boy simply tells the story. So this was one of the genius things of what Paulsen did. His way with words was absolutely fantastic, and he really captured the beauty of the way an 11-year-old boy sees the world and sees his world. And at the time, there they are, close to the border of Canada, very cold winters. And he's having this experience where the other 3 seasons are somewhat similar. you've got spring and things are beginning to grow. You have summer when things are in the height of growth, and then you have fall when there's a harvest, but things are still green. So in the other three seasons, things are green. And then winter happens overnight because you wake up, the cold front came in, it snowed, and in those northern regions, a lot of times when you get the snow, it's there, and you'll have more snowstorms, but it's white for months, and that's wintertime. And so it was just interesting how the author of this book captures the voice of an 11-year-old, because we get I've written a couple of books, and so when we're writing, the really good, fun parts of writing is when you go deep into your mind and you lose track of time and you don't even know who you are or what you're saying. But what you've written, when you go back and read it, is kind of a miracle. And with both of the books I've written, there are things that I read and I think, man, that's really good. This is good stuff. I got to mark this chapter. I got to go back and read this again, because we learn from our own writing, and that's when you know that you've done a good job with a book, is when you have those experiences. And I think the best books is when you can go back and you can edit the book and then throw out everything that wasn't that way, and then you have a really great book. But my point in this with the Winter Room is, it seems like he really captured the way an 11-year-old boy thought, and it was beautiful. There was this one quote that I put here on this slide, and he was having a conversation with his dad, and he was asking him a bunch of questions about his great uncle, and the dad answered him in a way that the child didn't like. And he said, he answers me like words around the edges. And I loved that, because sometimes we are answered, especially kids, as a child, I was answered, like most of my childhood, I never had really straight answers from people. And as an adult, I found myself doing the same thing to kids. And I think it's a problem. I think as adults, we need to be able to sit down with kids, look them in the eye, and talk to them like human beings, obviously in appropriate ways. But I just think that we would have a much better society if we had a generation of young people who were raised by adults who did not give us a bunch of words around the edges. So I don't know, that's something to think about. But Paulsen brings this out in the most simple way. And we could, we could go back and look at this book just about that and why the culture was that way. And we could come back another day, which we're not going to do, but we could, if we wanted to, just study this one thing about how parents and adults talk to children. And this book would have hours and hours of discussion on that. Yet there was just this one phrase in the book that brings that out to me, of words around the edges. Okay, let's go on to this next slide here and see what it looks like. And I am going to open this up and ask other people thoughts, but I'm just going to spew this out for a minute, and then for those of you who have read the book, I'm going to open it up here in a minute. So let me tell you about the farmer cycle. The farmer cycle is something that me and my colleagues have been talking about for at least 20 years. There's the 3 seasons when farmers work, and then there's winter. Now, if you have livestock, you're working in the winter also, but the work is different because the livestock is your work, and then the other 3 seasons, you have everything else too. So the farmer cycle was a time when you work those 3 seasons, and then you try to stay warm in the winter, and you're outside for an hour or 2, taking care of your livestock, making sure everything's okay. And then what do you do the rest of the time? And at the beginning of when North America had the revolution with and the American Revolution against England, and they won their independence. It was an interesting time because this farmer cycle had been going on for quite a while. So the Americans, how were they able to get their independence from the the greatest power on earth, which was the English Empire? How did they do that? I mean, it was kind of an accident. Some people say it was a miracle. And we're not really going to go into that tonight. It's a whole different topic. But it's interesting because they lived this farmer cycle and they read the fine print of government documents because there was time for stories. There was time to learn. There was time to think. There was time to communicate. People would gather at the church, and churches were like a community place where the community would gather. It was the meeting place. So yeah, they would go to church there, but they would also gather there as a community and they would talk about stuff. So the church of 200 years ago was like the social media of today. That was the town square where people would get together and talk about ideas. But the winter room, it was a time of creating, a time of culture. It was the time to raise your kids. The other 3 seasons, kids were slaves. But in the winter time, kids were kids, and you would raise your kids. You would do projects. You would think together. You would create art together. And so the farmer cycle and we see this in a lot of places. We see it in Canada. We see it in the United States. We see it in Europe. We see it in a lot of traditions, but we generally only see it in the history where there are winters. We don't see it so much in the tropics where they don't have a winter. So when I first discovered this book with the title, The Winter Room, that intrigued me, and I thought, farmer cycle, what is this? And then when I read the book, I was screaming hallelujah because he captured it perfectly. He captures that farmer cycle. And, and we could argue whether the farmer cycle is a good thing or a bad thing, or a beneficial thing, or a thing that's outdated. We could have those arguments, although we don't have time tonight to probably argue that. If you want to talk about that, we certainly can bring that up. But I do think that in history where we've had this farmer cycle, we have had an educated people. And so I think that that is a good thing. So now that our modern advancements in technology and inventions have got us to a point where we think differently, I think the thinking is because our lives have changed. Electricity, a fantastic blessing, but we're not reading the fine print of government documents. That sounds like a disaster, doesn't it? First of all, it sounds boring. It sounds horrible. It sounds like who would ever want to do that? But we don't understand government nowadays, where people who lived the farmer cycle did understand that, because they were stuck in a room for months. And why do I say a room? Well, because you would close the doors to the rest of the house. The rest of the house was cold, and the one room that was warm, where you had your fireplace, that's where the family would be. They would sit there and they would interact. And that's something that we need to be doing. Nowadays, modern people, if you're in the other room and you want to talk to them, you get your phone out and you text them. And I'm saying that like it's not a good thing, although I probably have done that 10 times this week. So life changes for us, but are we keeping the good things? So anyway, I have other things to say about this book, but at this point, I want to shift gears. So I want to open this up. Go ahead and unmute yourself. If you want to say something that you saw in this book that was good or bad or true or false, something you loved, something you hated, it doesn't matter. I just want to discuss the book. What did you get out of the book?
Well, I guess I feel like I'm just sort of jumping in right now. Uh,
Perfect, Mara. You jump right in.
I was struck by I felt like it felt validating of an experience that I've never had. So it felt kind of like, it felt like it would mean more after having had a lot of these experiences, but it was very immersive, yet very simple, and I really liked that. Um, it was uh, it was interesting how in the beginning of the book it talks about how like you can't really put smells or light or sounds into a book, but it did a good job at attempting to do so, and I think that it managed more than most books to bring that experience in.
Yeah, thank you. Was there a specific part that you can remember that actually did that brought that, like maybe the sense of smell or the sense of or whatever?
I think like especially like the sort of the unpleasant moments that he sort of expressed during spring of smells, and then also with just really kind of hating fall because of all the killing. Uh, it was quite. I think what you said about how, because it was from the perspective of an 11-year-old boy who's just sort of saying, expressing things without these notions of proper speaking. He really was just using what words he had to um, to express something, and it came across because he was just like, I hate the killing, and I hate the uh, and spring isn't the nicest season ever, because it's just it gets soft, and then everything smells so much more. And uh I did kind of just barely like re-listen to it before this, but it's also like sort of jumbled in my head again. But
Yeah, that's
I
beautiful.
thought, yeah, it was beautiful.
All right.
I have
Anybody
a.
else? You can pop right in.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
I have a thought. So it's been probably 4 months since I listened to the Winter Room. So I might have facts mixed up, but correct me if I'm wrong. Um, there's a part towards the end of the book when his brother challenges his uncle and tells him that his stories are like they're terrible, they're fake, all these things. And you watch his uncle, I think it's his uncle, just absolutely crushed by that. And he feels justified. His brother feels justified because he's like, he's lying to us and that's not right. And then later on when they're hiding, I think it's not the hayloft, but there's a place next to all the hay that they went to that they were hiding at. And they are talking, and then they watch their uncle come out, and he's holding axes, and he chops some wood, and they're just standing there in shock and awe because the stories that he was telling were reality, and they saw that happen. And I loved to see, like, you watched the uncle be crushed and doubt himself and feel like he was a fake or a fraud. And then you see him go out and prove to himself, because he wasn't doing it for anyone else but himself. You see him go out and prove to himself that it was a reality, that he was all all the stories that he told, they were real. And then you also see the flip side. His brother, he feels so justified in calling his uncle out. And then he gets rebuked when he sees his uncle take the action he was telling stories about that seemed fantastic, but were actually true. And so you see this it's not a character arc, but like you see his character grow when he realizes, oh, he was telling the truth. And I feel bad now because I was calling him a liar when he was telling the truth. And so, I don't know, it was just really cool to see the growth of both his uncle and his brother as they navigated that experience. And I loved that. That was cool.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It really is so great. And you're right. You wanted to be corrected if you were wrong. It was his uncle. It was actually his great uncle. So it would have been the same generation as his grandfather, but his grandfather had died. And so two great uncles were living in the house with them. And so every night they would, well, like every day, I'm thinking of night, but that's my paradigm in 2024, right? So, but every day for like probably most of the day, the whole family's in there. So there's the two boys, there's the two great uncles, and there's mom and dad in a tiny little house in the upwoods, northern Minnesota. And what do you do for 5 months of snow and winter and 40 below nights and maybe 70 below nights on bad nights? So they tell stories. And the two old grandpas, well, all three of them, his grandpa too. So the two uncles and the grandpa who's not present in the story, they came from Norway. They were Norwegian, and they were loggers. And that by profession, they were woodcutters. And they spent their lives doing this amazing amount of physical labor every day, and they would work extremely hard. So it's a different world than we understand now. I mean, people still work hard now, but it was a different world back then. And so what do they have? What do old people have? Forget the story for a minute. Let's just talk about human psychology. What does an old person have?
Experience.
Yeah, experience. Thank you. We have our experiences. What do very young people have? We have energy and hope for the future, right? We hope for the future and we want to be something. And in the book, the older brother, and of course he doesn't say anything because the story is told by the younger brother, but the younger brother says, my older brother, he wants to grow up, and his name's Wayne. He says Wayne wants to grow up and he's going to be a professional baseball player. Isn't that what all little boys say at some point? I'm going to be a fireman or a policeman or a baseball player, whatever. That is the story of the youth. We have a dream. Why? Because we have a hero. Because we met someone. Baseball cards used to be a thing before there were computers. Maybe they still are, I don't know. But these kids probably would have had baseball cards back in at that time. And so they had heroes. So in this winter room, you've got the two great uncles, Nels and what was the other one's name? Help, somebody save me. Anyway,
Uncle David.
Yeah, David and Nels. Right, thank you. So you've got these two uncles, and they're the ones with experience because they're old. And we don't know how old they are. From Eldon's perspective, the 11-year-old boy who's telling the story, he said, they're so old we don't even know how old they are anymore, which is probably something. They probably knew how old they were. It was just a way that adults talk to kids. And from an 11-year-old's perspective, that's what he knew, which I don't like, but that's irrelevant. So these old people have experience. And in a good culture, like a really healthy culture, young people respect the old people because of their experience. And I was on a webinar a couple hours ago with this older lady her and her husband revolutionized how we work cattle, in a low stress way, in a way that blesses their life. It was beautiful. I went to tears twice in that, because here is a person who spent their life serving the cattle community of the world, whoever would listen to them, and teaching them incredible, beautiful things. And here she is in the latter years of her life, and she's still sharing her incredible stories. They went to the Aleutian Islands to round up wild cattle that had been dropped off there 2 decades previously, and there were too many on the islands. The BLM needed to get them off of there, and they couldn't get them off because they're wild cattle. When you think of a modern herd of cattle, we think of like, okay, so there's going to be like 100 cows out there and a couple of bulls. No, there were half bulls and half cows because they had become a native group of cattle, and they had never seen humans and horses. So how do you get them off? And here's this wife and her husband, and they went up there and they did it because they were brilliant people who understood how to deal with the bovine. So old people have experience, and we need to listen to them because they're the ones who know stuff. But we've kind of lost that in our culture today. Nowadays, our old people are put into, we hide the old people, and there could be some, maybe we need to have them in a facility to have better care. But what we have lost in our society is we don't have them interacting with the young people. And I think that's a shame, and it's miserable. We need to have our young people listen to the stories of the old people because the wisdom of the ages matters. And that is something that Gary Paulsen brings out in this book so beautifully. He just beautifully tells it in the voice of an 11-year-old. And I totally loved it. Okay, who else?
I want to say something.
Abigail, go ahead. I'm going to mute mine so you can talk into yours.
You might also have to turn this down. I can just talk into yours.
Okay, come over here.
Okay. I'm on the screen twice now. But I loved this book because it's of the way it's separated. Mari already said like the beginning part, like you can't express the smells or the sounds in words, but we're gonna try to give you the experience. And this last summer, I took William's Georgic schoolroom class, and I was here for 4 months, and I had my own garden. And one of the things that he challenged us to do, that was part of the class, was to have a garden journal. And I loved how there was the 4 seasons in the book that talked about how things changed, and like the energy would change and the animals would change, and everything had a season. And I noticed that in my garden, as I watched the patterns in nature and I watched how the earth would change and everything, the animals and the plants, they kind of just know when something's about to like change. And I would write down, there's patterns in my life too. And I would start to see patterns in my life of things that would change with like a season. And I think there's patterns in the way that we grieve. There's patterns in the way that we grow and develop. And so I loved how Gary was able to kind of give that framework for this observation and mindfulness of nature and how it changes. And I think if we could go a step further and look in our lives of how we change and what patterns we have and how we watch ourselves grow and mature and progress, and listen to the stories of people with more experience than us and use our energy to do good. It's amazing what you can do when you watch patterns and you're mindful of what's happening in your life, and that all is easier to do when you're in contact with the earth and the nature outside, because you can start to see those patterns reflected in your life. So I just wanted to share that experience. I really loved it. And if you guys haven't ever done a garden journal this year, if you have a garden, that would be really awesome. Just writing down experiences, what you did, and the things that come to your mind as you're in your garden. Highly recommend.
Thank you, Abby. That's awesome. So beautiful, so good. All right. Anybody else? Who wants to go next?
I have something to say.
Michael, let's have you go.
Okay. So one of the parts I really liked about the book was when the grandpas told the story and the uncles told the story, that it felt like you were just like sitting there in the winter room, like with them, with the family, and that like it just felt like you were there when it was told. So it was like you're there when he's telling the stories about this crazy trickster who tricked this other person, and or whatever stories he's saying, and it just feels like you're there and you really get like, yeah, I love the book.
Nice. What, Michael, what was your, did you have a part that was like your very favorite part?
Favorite, I really liked when he grabbed the axes and showed that he could do it to himself. And I also liked the part when he taught the one story he keeps on telling about like when his like who he first married or whatever. I like those two.
Nice. Yeah. It's interesting. You say that, you love the whole book and you felt like you were there with like in the winter room with them. That is the genius of Paulsen. That tells you have a good writer when he can just suck you right in there to the moment. That's why people love Louis L'Amour, is because he sucks you right in there to that moment. So thank you, Michael. That's perfect. Okay, Becca, you had something to say.
Yes. So in the section where was it Uncle David telling the stories?
Yeah.
He was telling the story of the woodcutter, and I thought it was really beautiful. I really enjoyed just how he was describing his experience when he was younger, and he was explaining how him and all of these other people came to the new country, and they were woodcutters, and you could hardly see in front of your face in a forest because it was so thick, and they were cutting down the trees and doing logging, and in the winter the rivers froze and it was like they were icy roads, and the teams of horses would drive along the rivers and take the logs, and the little kids would go ahead of them and put straw down so that the loads wouldn't slip on the downhills, and then they would leave the logs on the frozen water, and when it thawed in the spring they would go downstream to the mill. And it was so, I felt like it was very beautiful, and you could see the beauty in their life and the satisfaction that he had of labor and the excitement of progress. And then looking back as an older man, he said we cut them down without thinking, and he mentioned how there were just empty fields of stumps, and he expressed his regret, and there wasn't really a resolution. It just kind of sat in that moment where he explained this beautiful thing that he had done with his manly strength and youth, and then how he kind of regretted it, even though it was amazing in the moment. And like Abby was talking about patterns, I feel like that's also a pattern where sometimes we have regrets. And I think there's something very healing for me in experiencing that vicariously, and just letting it sit and realizing that even though there was a regret, there were other things in their lives that were worth living for and that made life beautiful still.
Yeah, that you've opened up some really deep topics there. That was beautiful, Becca. Thank you. That reminds me of something. In a lot of book discussions that I've held before, we've often talked about the different types of books or classic works, and we're not going to get into that tonight because it's a really big conversation. But I just want to open up the idea that some classic works are broken. Okay, so there's good ones, there's bad ones, there's broken ones, and that's the topic we're not going to get into tonight. But I think, and so usually I like go off on and we talk about that for an hour, and then I ask the people, what kind of book is this? So since we're not going to have that conversation, I'll tell you my opinion. I think The Winter Room is a broken classic. So what is the quick definition of a broken work? A broken work or classic or book means that the author doesn't fix it for us. So they present a problem, and then we read the book. Now the book is part of me. It's part of my life. What am I going to do about it? And so here we have, and I think it said there was like you could see 15 miles of nothing but stumps. And like you said, Becky, he really regretted that. Well, have we seen problems with deforestation? Yeah, we have seen problems with that environmentally. And I mean, is it good to harvest a tree and make something out of it? Absolutely. But for every tree we harvest, we need to be planting enough other trees that we can have another harvest. We need to have a perpetual harvest. That's the point. And so for me in my life, when I harvest a tree, am I planting trees to replace that tree? And that would be fixing it for me, that would be fixing the problem. So that's a beautiful thing that you bring up, Becca. Thank you for pointing that out. That is really, really beautiful. Okay, who else read the book and wants to? Okay, Esther's here. She has things to talk about.
I really liked just like the whole idea of having a winter room, because like in today's society, there's like kind of this pull of like you shouldn't listen to your elders, you shouldn't like have as deep of a relationship with your family. You should choose your own family, and like if your family isn't right for you, leave them behind. And so I just like the idea of like actually striving to build those relationships, because like in a winter room you can't just run away. Like if you don't like your family, you kind of are stuck with them. But like it's so interesting. Like I just love that idea of sticking with them and like I don't know, learning to love these people. And when you have a hard time, like when his older brother did, where he was like, you're just lying to us, like I don't know, they like worked through it and they were able to actually have those good relationships, and they didn't just like leave when it was hard, and they just pushed through. I really like that idea. Just keeping true to your family and stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. That is awesome. You say something that is just so frustrating to me. And you said in today's world, there's like this voice, maybe those weren't your words, but there's a voice that it's just kind of obvious that, well, if you don't get along with your family, then don't listen to them and leave.
Yeah.
And that's accepted.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
The modern take on it. So.
Oh, no. That's miserable. But you say it with such conviction and such truth and such that's the world you've grown up in. Here's my 18-year-old baby girl and teaching me about the world we live in. And that's just so heart-wrenching. That's so wretched. And when you say it, I believe what you're saying, but I can't believe it. How can the world be that way? There is opportunity to live such a better life.
And that's the glorious thing about these books, is because when you read them, it grounds you and it brings you back to the values and the truth of if there can be more. Like this isn't just where we are. This isn't just the world we live in, and it's not just always going to be this way. Because if we go back to those values and we live those values of holding to your family and having a place to go to talk, whether it's the winter room or whether it's just having that relationship with your family, having that place, it's like there is hope and like we can get through it and we will make the world better.
Yeah. Thank you for fixing that for me, because my heart was hurting. And that's why we create this whole, that's why we're doing this. That's why we're on this Zoom meeting. That's why I created the Georgic Schoolroom. It's why I teach my classes. It's why I have a garden, is because the world can be a better place than the wretchedness that we can often find in the world. There certainly is hope. Okay, who's next?
I'd like to try and share my thoughts here.
Perfect, Brenly, go ahead.
So some of my thoughts actually play off of what Peter already said. I really liked going back to Uncle David and the woodcutter story. I felt like that was the climax of the book. I felt like that was everything that he was leading up to. And there was lots of messages in the book, but I feel like that was the main one he was trying to emphasize that had the largest impact. And I think the lesson that I learned from it, it took me a while to wrap my head around, but I think I really liked that it showed this message of truth. Because in our society today, going back to what the world believes, how truth is such a skewed concept nowadays, and everyone's just so desperate to prove that they're right and that this is correct and that other people are wrong. And so I love that Uncle David's example teaches us that if we know the truth, then we don't have to prove anything to anyone. That if no one, we don't need to try and argue our point to make someone else believe us, because it's not going to do us any good. But our integrity is going to be shown through our actions rather than our words, and I liked that. And I also like this story too because I think some of my favorite moments in the book were when Wayne and Eldon, they were kids, aside from all the hard work and the farm chores, which there was a lot of them. I wrote a list and it's a lot of farm chores, but I loved the moments when they were jumping in the hayloft and when they were playing at the lake and just doing things like that. That made me happy. And so I think the conflict that Wayne had when he thought his uncle was a liar, that's like a moment we all get to when suddenly our childhood ends, or suddenly the hopes that we hold as children, it just seems like gone. It seems useless. And those are hard moments. It's hard when our childlike hopes become, or the way we see the world, I guess, becomes unjust and unmerciful, unlike how we saw it as a child. And so I love that Wayne was proven wrong, because I think we always need to hold on to those hopes, and we need to remember, I don't know, I just love that concept of, I don't know how to word it, but just being a child again, taking those moments to best work hard and be responsible and do the tasks that we need to, but also to know the balance between living our childlike dreams. And so, yeah, those were some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Brinley. That was beautiful. I love that. That is good. You mentioned real briefly that you made a list of the chores that they did. That's awesome. That is so cool. It's so interesting to see what different people get out of a book. I never thought of writing down all the chores that they were doing, but I mean, they're coming back to me like they were feeding the calves, and most calves would get it, but then there's the stupid one that just, and it won't learn. I've been there. Sometimes calves won't learn to do what they need to live. So that's great. Thank you for that observation. Okay, who wants to go next and share something from that they've read in this book?
Can I say something again? I don't want to
Mari, please go ahead.
Okay. Oh, here, I'm just gonna try to find, actually, oh, goodness. I'm gonna actually go, sorry, wasting time right now. I just don't want it to be too loud, so I'm gonna go somewhere I know will be quiet enough. So I guess, can you guys hear me? Do I still have, yeah, okay.
I can hear you loud and clear, Mari. Go ahead. You're good.
Basically, I found it very interesting, the sort of the push and pull of death and life, that, I mean, we sense it through everything, but the book really did implement the concept of death and even just decay or decomposition with farming. Early on in the book, Uncle David expresses, or rather, Eldon says how Uncle David wants to just have his body thrown on top of the manure pile when he dies, because then his body will go to some use. And I think, and a lot of Uncle David's stories end with the characters dying. And I think there's sort of this theme of purpose throughout the story of like, what's my purpose? And I'm thinking about near the end, which it's been touched on a few times, when Uncle David like has the 2 axes in his hands, and he's trying to prove to himself that it's true, that he was this great woodcutter. I think, I'm not sure it was mentioned, but he looks up to the sky for a moment, and I'm not sure if I'm looking into this too much, but it feels like a moment of like praying, and he's praying for this moment of like sort of a youthful sort of purpose, and like there's purpose throughout all of life, but I think his expression of just throw my body on the manure pile when I'm dead is sort of like this, like, what am I worth right now? Like, just throw my body on the manure pile. And I think there's this real ache for being useful and having purpose in our lives and having our actions mean something. And I'm not sure that I have like a real point, but I loved the that was a consistent theme throughout the book of, we really do need to feel that what we believe is being that we're manifesting our beliefs into our lives, that we're manifesting the stories we tell ourselves into our everyday lives, and the things that we idealize are what we're living as well.
That is
And
so
I think that takes faith and God to do so, to consistently bring those beliefs into our material lives.
Yeah. Thank you, Mari. That was so beautiful and profound. I have nothing to say, so somebody else can share now. Mari, that was great. Thank you. Such good things. Now remember, I don't put anybody on the spot on these classes, so I'm probably not going to call on you. You just have to be brave and unmute and start talking if you want to, okay?
All right. I have something to say. Something I liked about it was I love the simplicity that they captured in the book, just like the simplicity of everyday life and all the tasks that they were doing and everything. And they were doing a lot of hard things that lots of us don't do in our everyday life. But I love the simplicity that is kind of just throughout all of it. And I think that just because something's simple doesn't mean that it's weak or unimportant. I think there's actually a lot of power in simplicity. And I really like that, because you could definitely feel that throughout the book.
Nice. Yeah, simplicity. Power in simplicity. Thank you, Kirsten. That's awesome. So good. Okay, who hasn't gone that wants to?
I can share something.
Starla, go ahead.
Okay. So I listened to the book. I loved it. It was amazing. But it did not start out that way. I was like, this is gonna be really boring. Just because all the details at the beginning, just not my style of reading. I don't know. I like more, I don't really read storybooks very much. Anyway, but I don't have much to say because everybody's touched on everything that like stood out to me as well. But it was yeah, the same part that was like wow was when they saw Uncle David, you know, do the axe thing, and Wayne was wow, I can't remember the first guy's, not Wayne, but his brother, the one that's talking all the time.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
remember his
Eldon, yeah.
yeah. He was like, we should go down and tell him that we saw him, and it was like, no, it's just for himself. Like, we would ruin the moment, you know. Like, and I just, very profound, but yeah, yep.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, that was good. Good stuff. Thank you, Starla. Okay, is there anybody else who wants to say something about the book? I'm going to open this up for garden Q&A here in a second. John, you had some comments about the book.
Well, I was raised on the farm. As a matter of fact, when I was 11, I remember the farmer across the road, and so had horses that he used to plow his field. And so it was, I'm not old, I guess I'm not old, I don't know. It was 1959, so you can figure out how old I am. And so I related very much to the book, and I greatly appreciated all the comments that you brought forward, and enjoyed them, because of course it helped me relive, listen to the book this week, but helped me relive and remember some of the things that I've already forgotten. So I appreciate your comments and your good analysis too.
Thank you, John. So in the beginning of the book, John, this is a question for you, and I think everybody will benefit from this. In the beginning of the book, okay, first of all, the book was cool because it didn't really have chapters, and it didn't have like a foreword and a prologue and all the things that a lot of books have. So it just, you open it up and it starts out with tuning. And what does that mean? You know, but if your name's Gary Paulsen and you're as successful a writer as he was, you can do whatever you want with a book, right? So tuning, and then he starts talking about what books can't have. Books need readers, but you can't smell things in books. You can't really see things. All you can do is read the book because you're not really there. But this book really needs you. And so that was just, it was fascinating to me. It's a whole different style of writing. It's a whole new thing. He just completely invents this new thing. So before we were talking earlier, before we started this meeting, John, and you mentioned that when it got to certain parts, something happened to you. Would you share that with us?
Oh, well, sure. So I witnessed it like Eldon did, the butchering of cattle and the pigs, and probably pigs were killed the same way on our farm as they were on theirs, and cattle, of course. My dad took out the 22 and shot. We had the Rose and Bud, and he shot Bud, you know, and watched how he butchered that cow, and so the description is so good in the book that I in fact was able to see, hear, smell, all those kinds of things that I had experience with as a child, and that's truly, it's made the book alive to me. The other thing that I thought about was we spent our nights around the radio and listening to the radio. Now, instead of listening to Uncle David telling stories, but I'm sure that Dad told stories too, but and Mom, but because I grew up with a great sense of family, you know, and who my ancestors and my grandparents were, and so on, and well, our family came from Sweden, and so yeah, so there was another thing. But we lived around the radio and we listened to the radio at night. And when we did the dishes after dinner, the radio would be on, and we'd listen to the stories and the news or whatever it was on. I was 15 when we got our first television, so yeah.
Nice, thank you. All right, let's open this up for garden questions real quick. If you have something else you need to say about the book, you can go ahead and say it. Shauna, you have a question. If you can go ahead.
Hey, hi there, everybody. Shh, tell the boys to be quiet. Tell the boys to be quiet. Sorry. So I'm new at this. I just got your book and I have not read it, the one about worry-free gardening or eating. And I just need to know, since I haven't read the book and I don't have a lot of time, can you tell me how I can do that soil analysis if my soil is garbage? Or I mean, should I not even bother with it and just like add a bunch of compost? What's a beginner's way for me to start enriching my soil? Because I've done some composting and some additions like manure and that kind of thing, but I don't know how to determine yet what's wrong with my soil to know how to correct it. So what do you suggest?
Yeah. So here's the simple solution. This is my elevator speech right here. I can do it in 12 seconds. Somebody time me. Ready, set, go. Cover your ground with as much organic matter as you can get. Old, dried out, rotten leaves, manure from a barnyard, old rotten hay. Be careful with hay because it'll be filled with weed seeds. So you might want to compost it first or spray it with lots of water first. Somebody said time. They actually timed me. I can't believe it. And so there you go. It's over. My time's up.
That's it. So just whatever old stuff you can get, cover the garden with it, and then plant the seeds underneath the stuff you've covered it with?
No. So you need to go ahead and read my book, and then you need to stay on these. But so come back every week and we'll talk, or call me or whatever, and we can talk a little bit more. But yeah, there is a little bit more. If you start most of your plants as transplants, and then you transplant the transplant into the mulch you've put on top. Okay. Keep that mulch wet. Don't ever let it dry out. You need to be watering it 3 times a week in the summer. The best garden you'll have will be the second year after you start this. This will get you started. And here's the reason why. The detritus, which is all this compostable material that you're going to gather and put on the soil surface, we call that detritus. So that detritus sphere on top, it's the food source for your beneficial microbes, okay, for the fungus and the bacteria. And you need to start feeding them, okay?
Okay.
And so that's the main thing. People who are tilling their gardens, they're killing their microbes, and then their gardens don't grow. So that's a problem.
Okay, get rid of the tiller. Okay.
That's what we brought before.
Yeah. Keep the mulch wet. Okay, do you recommend me using coffee grounds?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, they're good.
And
anything that rots, you can use.
Okay, because I've been getting fish heads and fish guts too.
Good, yeah. It'll make your garden smell like fish. It'll be fantastic.
I know, the neighbors love me.
So do the neighbors' cats, and they'll dig up your garden.
Yep. Okay. Great. I will read the book. I just wanted a quick, easy answer, but there's no easy answer.
That's it. That's the quick, easy answer. And if you need more context, read the book. But there's like 300 pages that tell you to do that.
Oh, okay.
You got to read the book, or you won't know why you're doing it, and then you won't, because everybody talks himself out of it. That's why we had to write a whole book around that 20-second thing.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Thank you, William.
You bet. You bet. Okay, we have a question in the comments here. It says, is it easier to start a garden farm in Nevada or Utah? Politically, taxes, soil, etc. The soil's the same. You're in the Great Basin Desert, unless you're not, which means you would either be in St. George and then you're in the Mojave Desert, or Vegas, because that's kind of Nevada, but most of it's the Great Basin Desert. So that would be little bit different. And then politically, taxes are, it's cheaper to live in like Nevada. So living expenses are cheaper than Utah by a lot. And as far as like the business stuff, Nevada's a really friendly place to set up a business, like your LLCs and C corps and stuff. It's a little bit more friendly to set them up in Nevada, although it costs more to initially set it up. In Utah, I think it's under $100. In Utah, it's about 300. I mean, I said the wrong thing. In Nevada, it's about 300. In Utah, it's cheaper. So, politically, I don't know. It depends what kind of farm you're doing. If you're in Utah and you're wanting somebody to fight for you at the state legislature each year, you've got the Red Acre Center who will do that. So if there's a law that's holding you back from doing something, they have changed a massive amount of laws over the last decade because they're awesome. So that would be Cimbria and Sarah, who go up there every year. Of course, they're doing some of that work in Quail Hollow Farm in Nevada is doing a lot of that work too. They're in Overton, but they do a lot of that. So yeah. The thing with political and taxes is we think we live under a kingdom. That's why every 4th year is when most Americans think that you vote. We think we vote for a king, and we're wrong. We're still a republic. All you have to do is go to anybody can walk into the state capitol when the legislature's in session. You can walk in there and listen to the sessions. You can raise your hand and you can talk about it. We the people actually means that we the people are the government. It's we the people who are not involved. We the people choose a king. We want this guy to be the king. He'll go kick their butts. Oh! If you want the taxes and the politics to actually work, then go to your state capitol when the legislative sessions are open and get up there and give speeches. It's your right as an American citizen. If you're not an American citizen, become one and then go do it. When I was living in Oregon, we went down to Salem when the session was open. Then we gave speeches because we were raising chickens, but if you slaughter more than 1,000 chickens, you have to have $1 million slaughtering plant do it for you. If you have less than 1,000 chickens, then you don't have to do that, right? That's the law now. Before we went and screamed and jumped up and down and gave our speeches, it was any chicken in the state of Oregon had to go to a slaughtering plant. Well, we got it changed to what the federal regulation is, which means you have to have more than 1,000. So what did we do? Well, we went home and we, like for the first 2 years we were there, we just raised 999 chickens. And that's how many chickens we would sell. So we were within the law. But once they changed it, then we ordered 1,000 chickens. Because that was our capacity anyway. But it was just so stupid that if a random person, a mom and dad with 3 little kids, they want to raise 10 chickens and butcher them, they were liable of felony charges and state charges. It was stupid how strict those laws were. And it was all in the name of food safety. So Carmela, hopefully, I don't know, man. I have no idea if this is in context of what you're asking, but there you go. Sometimes we get excited, especially when somebody says politic. So anyway, yeah, you can unmute and you can ask if that didn't answer your question. I may have a better answer for you. But anyway, other questions?
I have one. That was a good answer, but I was wanting to know also about water versus Nevada and Utah.
Okay, so when most people say Nevada, they mean Las Vegas. So what do you mean when you say Nevada?
I don't mean Las Vegas. I mean like Wells area.
Okay, so up here where I am. Yeah, so they're about the same. I mean, it's Utah, Nevada, water's all about the same. Water rights are kind of the same. If you can get them, great. If you can't, then you need to come to my class so you can figure out how to have water, because it's too complicated to teach you right now.
Okay.
Meaning humans can change the water cycle. We can do it. And because
You
there's people doing it. So we
You
can
need
make it
water
rain more
witching.
often. What?
You
What?
need water witching to find water.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
what
you
need
can
to
drill
do.
a well for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do water witching.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, yeah. Okay, today I heard that well, alfalfa is a cover crop, but alfalfa is also a perennial,
Yeah.
which means it's going to keep growing and growing, and you just keep cutting and cutting it. So how can that really be a cover crop?
Well, it's just within context of what you're doing with the cover crop. If you want a cover crop to be there for 5 years, then you want perennials. But if you want a cover crop in the context of an annual garden, so you want your cover crop to die in the winter time so that you don't have plants growing when you're trying to grow garden crops, then you don't want the perennials. But there are
Yeah,
a
they were
lot of
suggesting-
contexts where you would absolutely want a whole bunch of perennial cover crops. Let's say I have a Midwestern farm that's been farmed for 50 years. I want to heal that soil. I want to seed down a set of cover crops, like 50 different species. I want them, 90% of them to all be perennials, and I'm not going to do anything with that land except let it grow for 3 years. After 3 years, I'm going to move a herd of cattle in there, and we're going to start rotational grazing. So it's going to have that ground covered permanently for the next 30 years. It's still called a cover crop.
Right. This was more for growing in your beds. And then they said you cut it down. And if it comes back a bit again, you just cut it down. Well, we know that it's going to come back again. Like in Missouri, some people will get 4 cuttings of alfalfa.
Yeah.
And so I don't know about Utah, but I just thought, I don't know if that's a really good cover crop.
Well, yeah, it just depends what you want to do with it. If you're reading that in a gardening book and they're saying like that it's going to be this fantastic thing for your growing bed, then I would say that they needed a better editor who was more ecologically literate, because any gardener who goes out there in the springtime to start planting, it's going to be a nightmare to have a bunch of alfalfa coming up. It's out of context to make gardening really fun and easy. It's a great context if you want to punish your children by weeding, but I think that's child abuse.
or using the lawnmower across them, or a scythe or a weed eater and cutting. Well, that's what they suggest. You cut it down every 6 inches. You cut down and throw that on your garden bed. But what about the garden bed that you planted the alfalfa in? You can't plant carrots in that. Maybe you could pull away a little bit to put in a tomato, but
we
I just don't see it.
Yeah, we just
being
need a
good.
different cover.
Yeah. What are some cover crops that shall I say it, that you could plant now in a bed that's going to be planted in the summer, like with the summer crop type things like tomatoes and squash and corn? Is there a cover crop that we could do right now that we could cut it down like that?
Well, you're in the dead of winter. You're in super early spring, maybe, depending on so, but where you are, I'm still calling this winter.
Yeah, it is.
In St. George, Utah, it's early spring, time to plant peas and everything. So there's nothing for you to plant right now. Wait 3 weeks, and then you could plant all kinds of stuff. So do you want a cover crop that's going to give you food?
Both.
Okay.
We were thinking of, like you said, the fava beans, and I discovered that True Leaf has 5 different fava beans.
Nice.
So I had today.
So fava beans and peas, any kind of peas, snow peas, snap peas, English peas.
Perfect.
Any kind of edible pea. Don't get peas that are not edible. Like the flower of sweet peas, they're not edible. They're poisonous. If you eat them, you're dead.
Okay.
So get edible peas. And then they'll grow up. There'll be this beautiful cover crop early spring, and then you'll have a harvest, and you'll be harvesting those into probably the 1st of June. But see, where you live, you can still plant tons of stuff up to June 15th and have a fantastic harvest. So
Awesome.
so those are the two main things I can think of off the top of my head. Of course, you've got kale, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, all that stuff too, and you can get that out in the first. Get your transplants growing good right now. Get them planted now. Now's the time to put the seeds in. Grow them good for 6-8 weeks. 8 weeks from now, what's that? You're into April. Get those planted. You'll be harvesting those in June and July, depending on their maturity dates. And then where you are, that's time to plant your fall stuff. So you can still get 2 crops out of your garden.
Yes. When you said plant them now, indoors or outdoors?
Yeah, plant your seeds in little seed trays right now, indoors.
That's what. And I'm also doing the winter sowing in jugs, just to experiment.
Good. Yeah, experiments are always good.
Especially the things that need cold stratification. They're out in the jugs on the deck. Some are in the garden.
Perfect.
But that'll be fun to see how they go. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, who's next? Who has a gardening question or even a comment about the book, whatever you want to talk about?
Can I ask another question?
Please do, Carmela.
So I've heard that down by St. George that there's some people that are growing pomegranates and nuts.
Yeah.
Nut trees.
Yeah.
Would that place be good for growing olive trees also?
A little bit too cold for olives. Unless there are some varieties of olives that I don't know about. But as far as I am aware, and I'm not that aware of the tropicals, but as far as I'm aware, all of your olives grow in the same as like citrus and avocados. So it's just a smidgy too cold. You would need to get into where you don't have the hard freezing winters. But I mean, there's people in Laverkin who have lemon trees on the south side of their house, and then like 5 nights throughout the winter, they'll go throw a couple of blankets over them, and it's so. I mean, there's that. You can play with that kind of stuff, but if you wanted to start a farm and have like 20 or 30 trees to actually produce a product, it's the wrong climate. It's out of context. So.
All right. Hey, thanks.
You bet. Okay, is there anything else? We're about to wrap this up for tonight. Next week, our book discussion will be The One Straw Revolution. You guys got the 10-second thing. If nobody unmutes in 10 seconds, I push end. That's how this works. So good night. Thank you for being here.
Hey, post that or something. The book, what is it? The One Star Revolution?
One Straw Revolution. It's
One Straw.
Yeah, this list is on my website, John.
Okay.
Go to my website and start clicking around. Go to classes and then scroll down and the list is there. One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. I can't say it because I don't speak Japanese. It's a Japanese name. Somebody probably, one of these young people probably speaks Japanese and they're laughing their heads off. Okay, good night. And same time, same link, different book, One Straw Revolution next week. Abby just posted the thing right here in the notes. There you go. Can you see the notes there, John? Okay, get a screenshot of that. I'll leave it open for a second. Thank you, Abby. That's why I surround myself with people smarter than me. They know how to do this stuff. Okay, thank you very much. Good night. And just remember, this was brought to you by our sponsor,
Survival Seeds.
survivalseeds.com. Go there to get your heirloom seeds. They are fantastic. I was going to say thousands, but that's probably true. Thousands of seedlings coming up right now from survivalgardenseeds.com. Okay. Good night.